confirmed live.
Yep, so we're confirmed live, members. Thank you and good morning. We have quorum, and I now call the 81st meeting of the Committee for Communities to order. Can I please remind anyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off. Mobile tablet devices, however, can be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network. No recordings or photographs may be taken. Can I also remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablet devices discreetly in a way which does not interfere with proceedings, and be aware of the cameras when using the tablet device and the sensitivity of microphones throughout the course of the meeting. I'd also like to remind members joining via Zoom to be mindful of whether the background on your camera can pick up any images that you're conscious of that possibility. So thank you, members. I'm moving to agenda item 1, which is declaration of interest. I remind members it's your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. So I just want to declare that I'm developing a members' bill, and have submitted to the Speaker a members' bill on homelessness, and also in relation to one item that may come up today, that I'm also a member of the Public Accounts Committee. So are there any interested members wish to declare? No, thank you. Agenda item 2 then, apologies. Are members aware of any apologies? Clerk, are you aware of any?
Morris Bradley.
Okay, Morris, an apology. Agenda item 3 then, members. As I'm sure you're aware, the further consideration stage of the sign language bill took place in plenary on Monday this week, and the final stage is scheduled for next Tuesday. Thank you all again for all of your work in relation to the bill, and the final stage will be an important landmark for the deaf community here. I think it's going to be really well received. Members, you will be aware. Kelly, go ahead.
Yes, Chair. Several members of the deaf community that met with us after the event mentioned that there is an event here on Tuesday in the Long Gallery, but I haven't seen anything directed to it. The community that appeared to be involved with it assumed that the committee had been invited, but I don't think we've received anything about that.
Can I check, Clerk? Have we been invited?
No, not at this point.
Yeah, I've heard of it on the grapevine as well, but I've no details or no invite at this stage. Is right. Okay, members, you will be aware of the Minister's announcement jointly with the ERA Minister regarding the Community Infrastructure Fund, an £8.32 million investment for 243 buildings, halls and facilities used by community and voluntary groups here. The list of the outcomes of the Stage 2 applicants can be found for your information at page 3 of the tabled papers. And I know that members, I'm sure, will look forward to looking into, and it's good to see investment going into community facilities, and we'll be, I'm sure, in due course scrutinising the detail of that, and future potential as well, maybe. According to the notes section of the press release, the original amount of funding supplied by the Minister is £6.32 million, with the remaining £2 million provided by the ERA Minister, Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. So it would appear the Minister has increased the investment from his previous announcement by £2 million. So any comments on that from members, or members content that we will be coming back to that? Agenda item 14 then, members, or item 4, sorry, is our draft minutes. They're contained at your packet, page 7. Do members have any edits or amendments to the draft minutes that they wish to highlight? Are members therefore content to agree the minutes of the 16th of April as drafted? Yep, thank you. Agenda item 5 then, members, is local councils and the anti-poverty strategy. And this is our first briefing of the day, and we're hearing today from Nilga. So, members, the briefing paper for the agenda item is at page 20 of the meeting pack, and I now like to welcome the following officials to the meeting. So, morning. So we're joined by Alderman Hazel Legg, who is Nilga Vice President. We're also joined by Councillor Matt Garrett, Nilga Vice President, Councillor Paul Robinson, and Paul is an Nilga member, and Alison Allen, who is Chief Executive of Nilga. So just to say, I think I've met at least 3 out of the 4 of you previously, and I know the important work that you do. I'd like to welcome you all very much to committee here on this important work. It's been a key issue for committee, the anti-poverty strategy, but also the input and the value of including local government in relation to the development and implementation of an effective anti-poverty strategy. So I think we're looking forward to the session in that regard. Hazel, I think it's yourself that's going to make an opening statement, and then we'll move to questions. Is that right?
Yes, it is. That's correct. Thank you. And thank you for inviting NILGA to this morning's Committee for Community session. As you've said, I'm Alderman Hazel Legge, Vice President of NILGA and Councillor with Lisburn and Castlereagh City Council. I'm joined by my colleagues from NILGA, Councillor Matt Garrett of Belfast City Council and NILGA Office Bearer, Councillor Paul Robinson of Fermanagh and Omagh District Council, and Alison Allen, NILGA Chief Executive. Ahead of this morning's session, you will have received NILGA's response to the draft anti-poverty strategy consultation undertaken by the Department of Communities. NILGA's 11 Council Strategic Policy Network met with the Department's anti-poverty team in September 2025 alongside officer level engagement through SOLACE to inform our regional response. This morning we will provide the regional local government perspective to the committee on the recommended direction of travel for a strong, impactful anti-poverty strategy. And I will now hand over to NILGA Office Bearer Councillor Matt Garrett, who is going to look at things from the community planning, structural drivers and councils as delivery agents. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I suppose first thing for me is to thank you for inviting us in here today. This isn't, I was in last week with NILGA, with the DAERA committee. And it's very much appreciated that local government have the opportunity to sit down with you and talk to you about these strategies. They're very important to council, so we really appreciate it. Just as outlined, councils across the north, we all have anti-poverty programmes in place. They are delivered through the statutory planning partnerships, and we all know that poverty affects health, employment, housing, well-being, education, and it does so all simultaneously, and therefore it requires a really joined up and whole systems response to it. Council evidence is clear that poverty in the north of Ireland is driven primarily by structural factors, including employment quality, low pay, insecure work, housing affordability, access to services and spatial inequality. Addressing poverty therefore requires a system-level intervention aligned across all of the departments and tiers of government, and not just relying individually on household-level responses alone. Community planning provides an established statutory framework for a whole system of working, bringing together the councils, executive departments, health partners, the community and voluntary sector, and employers around shared outcomes. And I suppose it's within this context that councils already operate as effective delivery agents for anti-poverty interventions. Councils will design and they will deliver place-based initiatives, including labour market partnerships, advice services, food and fuel poverty interventions, and targeted cost of living responses in collaboration with executive departments and the community and voluntary sector. Councils, for us then, are therefore not only stakeholders, but we're experienced delivery partners. Uniquely, we're placed to translate regional policy intent into practical local action. Council submissions consistently have highlighted that the draft strategy does not fully recognise this delivery role and call for councils to be explicitly embedded as co-designers and delivery partners within the implementation and the commissioning frameworks. From NILGA's perspective, the draft strategy provides a starting point for year one, but it probably requires further work to introduce measurable targets, clear timelines, and accompanying resources and delivery plan. NILGA would also support an early 2-year review of the strategy's work programme following re-engagement with delivery partners. So that's my element. I'm going to hand over to Paul. Paul's going to talk about rural poverty. I'm from Belfast, so I'm not best placed to talk about that. Paul will be best placed, so I'll hand over to Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Chair, for welcoming us here today. From Ananoma, poverty, and from Ananoma, I'll give you figures at the start here, is 22% of individuals living in relative poverty in the district before housing costs now, compared to 17% in Northern Ireland average. This is a 3-year average of 21, 22, 23 and 24. Poverty rate is the second highest of all Northern Ireland Council before housing costs. Child poverty estimated at 28 to 29%. Pensioner age poverty around 24% before housing costs. Portion of householders in poverty vary widely across the district, ranging from 13 to 33%. Cost of living and rural poverty. The district has the highest rural poverty impact, high cost on poor access to services, fewer employment opportunities, poor public transport and road infrastructure, ongoing digital exclusion, broadband access, digital poverty, low digital skills, food poverty, which is a big issue getting in the area, is the district has the third highest food poverty risk across Northern Ireland. Rural area are most at risk. Fuel poverty, the highest at risk rate of all 11 councils in Northern Ireland. Rural households mostly affected. 65% of the households in Fermanagh and Omagh use oil as their main form of central heating, compared to 61 to 63% for Northern Ireland Census 2021. Transport poverty. Over 1/3 of the homes are more than 10 minutes walk from the bus stop. Emergency poverty trends. Rising food bank reference. More working families requiring support. Advice provided. Report pending debt inquiries. Increase in poverty debt. Rent mortgage rates. Growing credit cards and benefit deductions. Most clients are negative budget with no savings. Some of these links between poverty and disabled and health. This in fact is 24 Poverty Support Programme. RAP, 80% of household support included someone with disabled and health condition. There is a strong link between those experiencing poverty and those requiring medical assistance, stress and mental health issue, particularly in rural communities. This is what the council put in themselves last year for 25-26. The council put in 102,700 school added food provision. Northern Ireland is the only justification within the universe providing the free school meals. 120,000 fuel support through agencies such as St Vincent de Paul's. 44,000 support Action for Children Advice Organisation Christian Against Poverty. 16,000 food support, food banks and the Southwest Age Partnership. 90,000 to fund poverty support programmes, Lift Up RAP, and RAP programme. It was funded by DFC, funded 175k, and PHA 12,000, FODC funded of 90,000, enabled to an added 100 households to avail of the poverty RAP Brown support. It's provided one-to-one support to families to access benefits, job opportunities, social and emotional advice, reference on appropriate health issues, etc. And added
Oh, sorry. I just want to clarify. We have heard actually from Fermanagh and Omagh Council when we had all the councils in, and I have to say it was very clear that Fermanagh and Omagh actually are probably leading the way on this. So appreciate the figures, but I do want to also get the members, because I think members are keen to get the questions as well. So if we could just ask you to be as succinct as possible, please.
Right, I'll be finishing now, Anna.
Yeah.
An audit 185,000 was provided by Fermanagh and Omagh for advice provided to independent advice providers. DFC provided an added 80k to those providers. The total finance provided by Fermanagh and Omagh in 25-26 was 557,700. This level of fund is not available and from Fermanagh in 26-27, yet it is increasing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what you've really done very, very well is set out the various ways that poverty impacts and the various metrics across which people experience poverty. And I have to say, I was struck with, I was listening to some of the commentary this morning on the way in around, the fact that I think it was the Secretary of State saying the Northern Ireland Executive has got more money than they ever got before, but none of that, and talking about whether or not we pay the same as other areas for some of the services, but very little of it deals with the fact that we have such rurality. Yeah. We have had such a lack of underinvestment in roads, in infrastructure. All those things have a price to pay, and people have to maintain cars and do things that people maybe in other parts don't, because they have access to public transport, for example. So there's lots of other ways in which I think we need to measure exactly what the situation is. But I do want to commend the work of all of the councils, and Fermanagh and Omagh, I have to say, did stand out in terms of the fact they have a plan. So you've set that out clearly. I do want to get the members of a couple of questions myself, and then I'll come to questions from members. First of all, and this is to any of the panel to pick up then, how significant is the absence, in your opinion, of measurable targets in terms of accountability and how we track progress of an anti-poverty strategy?
Yeah, I'm happy enough to cover that. As a local councillor in Belfast for 16 years, I'm well aware that councils will all have their own specific plans and their own corporate strategies and the things that they're trying to do. And what I outlined within that is at post RPA, we ended up with community planning powers that brought everybody together, that brought all of the agencies together to work towards common action plans, community plans within areas. They're all targeted. We're looking at targets within all of those and how we have impacts around everything. So I think that an anti-poverty strategy, it's very, very clear that it will certainly help partners, it will help councils, and it will help those that we're trying to target within our communities to try and have an impact with measurable targets. I think that's essential because councils will then be nearly looking and saying, well, what are our targets? How are we going to reduce poverty in this particular part of Belfast, or how are we? And if they don't have those measurable targets, then it becomes almost like a talking shop. So I think that it is extremely important to have those measurable targets.
Thank you. And then in terms of the role of local government within that, how do NILGA see councils being operationally involved in delivery, given the strategy doesn't clearly, that we have seen so far, does not clearly define a role for local government or community planning structures? How do you see that could be improved and strengthened?
I'll pick that point up if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah.
I think maybe the first thing I would say is that councils don't see themselves as just delivery partners. Yeah. And I think if we go back to basics, this speaks to the relationship between central and local and regional government. Local government is a sphere of government. It's not a hierarchy. It's not about tiers. And as well as the ability to deliver, which has been well demonstrated today, councillors are some of the closest elected representatives to the people that they serve, and your council officers are the same. They are talking every day at all levels, including at senior levels in councils, to the people that they actually are affected by their services. So I think what is absent for us in the document, in which we hope will come forward in some of the governance structures, is that councils just aren't a consultee or somebody that money is handed to whenever, perhaps money needs to be spent, but the councils have a seat equally at that table along with other bodies. I think that's very important for us. It goes to the core of restating and readdressing some of the issues we feel there is about our role. And I think, just speaking to some of the points that have been made before, this probably demonstrates some consistent feedback from local government about how multidisciplinary this issue is and how cross-cutting this issue is. It doesn't sit neatly in the form of one department, and councils are large multidisciplinary organisations providing a very complex and a wide range of services. We understand how to bring complex services together in a way that brings the combined effort towards a shared purpose. We get that can be hard with large infrastructure, both at political level and in officialdom. But we do that very well. We do that every day in everything that we do. You miss that opportunity. I think for us it's the lost opportunity, and we all know the people who will lose that will be the people who deserve the services at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I have to say, and I fully agree, as a representative who works along with councillors from across all parties in the local area, I do believe councillors have so much more inherent knowledge and understanding of their own area, of their own issues, as well as, and absolutely agree that council should have been involved fundamentally in the co-design process, and co-design never should be a one-off event. It should always be iterative and reiterative, and they should be more and more involved in as partners in that endeavour. Matt, were you looking to say something there?
No.
So I'll come to members then. So I'm coming first of all to our Deputy Chair, Cathy Mason. Cathy, go ahead, please.
Thanks very much, Gormaga Chair. Thanks very much for coming along today. As the Chair outlined, we had heard from all of the local councils a number of weeks ago, and it was a really, really productive session, and we actually got a lot out of it and a lot of actions out of it as well in terms of recommendations to the Minister and things like that too. So it was really useful, and I think it opened our eyes up a wee bit, even though we know the role of local councils. But when it comes to anti-poverty, Matt, I think you summed it up brilliantly, saying the policy intent into local delivery, and it is our local councils who are already doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to this. So just on that, we know that councils, and we heard it, that councils do a huge amount of work to try and alleviate poverty in their areas. Can you give me an idea, like we heard of the social supermarkets, we've heard of community transport, especially in like those more rural areas. Can you give us an idea of how you think this could be strengthened, and what more, if councils were given the resources and given, I suppose, the respect to do this, what more could they be doing?
Do you want me to take a look at that point? So I think what would help us as a starting point is if the combined efforts of all departments in this space were integrated at a policy level. So I think the strategy, whilst there are some attempts obviously to look at other services, we all recognise poverty is as much addressed in the Department for Economy. It's as much addressed in the Department of Infrastructure in terms of transport and infrastructure. I think that the delivery of everyone's intent is limited by not capturing that cross-cutting nature of this work. I get that accountability is hard. Systems sometimes don't support that. So having that would make things a lot more easier for us. There are examples of departments coming together and delivering initiatives well with councils, so that we are not receiving funding in separate tranches from individual departments with the same core objectives. That adds unnecessary administration. Sometimes a good example of that is the recent fund between infrastructure, DAERA and communities around supporting rural communities. And I've seen just an announcement this week, another announcement for community infrastructure between the DAERA Minister and the Infrastructure Minister as well. We need to see that in relation to this document. This does not sit in one department. That allows then funding to come to us at a higher strategic level. It allows funding to come to us in a combined manner, which means we're not working with unnecessary administration. So to give you an example, even just in the space of community, councils are probably working with 20 or 30 different funding agreements, often within one department. And that causes unnecessary causes distraction in terms of core purpose. So the ask is, let us work to the outcomes, give us the funding, hold us accountable for the outcomes, but focus less on the administration, and trust that we are a partner in government, not just a funding recipient. I think the other part of that is also making sure that money comes at a time when it enables strategic intervention. And as we know, sometimes money comes whenever there's underspends or it comes at the last minute. That impacts the council's ability to be strategic and intentional about what it's doing, although we of course do our best. That cohesiveness at your level, at policy level, allows us then to think in terms of council structures. So how do we integrate community planning with the work of our labour market partnerships? How do we integrate that with the work of our local economic partnerships? How do we integrate that with the work that we do with our community voluntary sector? Because it's when you bring this all together that you maximise the limited resources that we have and we get the best outcomes. So I think the missed opportunity is the real strategic alignment across more than one department. I think that's the missed opportunity, and we will follow suit by bringing you integration in terms and maximising the outcomes at a local level.
As a wee point to just in terms of the practical element from being within council, I think Alison touched on it. The multi-year funding is really important within councils. And as an example, I sat in a committee last week in the council, and it would have been the same last year and the year before, where we were talking about neighbourhood renewal funding coming down into councils, and the councils having to send letters at risk to organisations to say, well, we're only going to be able to give you 50% of your funding now. If that ability is there for councils to long-term plan in respect of poverty and what we're trying to achieve through the targets that we've already talked about, I think that's really important. And when it comes to what councils can do more, again, I'm reminded back to COVID and the pandemic, and the council stepping forward in respect of all that they done. And that was done in very close collaboration with the executive and with all of the departments, where right away councils kicked in and they supported the work that the executive were doing. I think that councils won't be found wanting if the resources are there to try and tackle some of this.
Brilliant. Just for another.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just on the just in something that you said, Alison, but just to follow up on that, Matt, like, and you've probably already answered it. How confident can councils be now without having an agreed multi-year budget here at executive level?
Yeah, I think that it's really important. Alison's talked about multiple funding streams that we have to deal with in council, and the uncertainty is that, you know, the only levers that we have in council is rates. Reality in terms of bringing in funding ourselves. 80% of our rates is spent on council services, paying for wages. It's like a household.
Yeah.
It's your income and it's what you do with it. And beyond that, we don't have very much more. We have 20% that comes from fees and bringing in fees, but also central government funding will offer us opportunities for delivery of projects. The multi-year funding is really, really important in terms of all of that. It gives that certainty. It gives us that ability to say, well, okay, we can plan for rates, we can plan for what it is that we need to do, but if we're assured that this money is coming into us, we can long-term strategically plan as well.
And you're already seeing the impacts of that uncertainty of that now.
Yeah.
Alison, then just briefly to pick up on a point that you mentioned the community planning partnerships and the local economic partnerships. Do you think that they can play a role? It is something that we heard from the councils whenever they were in. Do you think that they can be a delivery mechanism for the anti-poverty strategy?
I think that's already happening. So you've already mentioned Fermanagh and Oma's anti-poverty strategy. Other councils, Belfast, have inclusive growth strategy. The attempt is to bring the entire spectrum of what councils can do and other bodies can do to streamline delivery. So councils have that infrastructure, but the money that's going into labour market partnerships and potentially in relation to skills, that comes from another part of this department.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it doesn't come from the part of this department that is dealing with poverty and community infrastructure. So the fragmentation is a massive issue for us. And would you mind if I just added a point to illustrate, and potentially it will pick up what Paul will say? The councils that have the biggest issues with poverty are the councils that have the least financial flexibility because of their rate base. So Paul has talked about Fermanagh and Oma. So the discretionary money that Fermanagh and Oma may have to put into services that aren't classed as potentially, you know, bins, cemeteries, you know, those kind of statutory services that we have. Paul's council will have much less discretion in that space than Matt's council will have. It's huge. The difference is huge. The councils that are affected by poverty in the sense of rural poverty and the infrastructure and structural issues are also the councils that do not have the strongest rate base to be able to make those interventions themselves. The issues, it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention the issues with the rate support grant and addressing that, because the whole point of the rate support grant is to provide support, to provide the same services in Fermanagh and Oma that people in Belfast are getting, without them having to pay more. The effect of losing that money has meant, in effect, Paul's council has to raise the money itself.
Yeah.
So the people who are already most disadvantaged are having to pay more for exactly the same service than people in Belfast who already have the structural advantages, for example. So that just is it just illustrates how interdependent, but the rate support grant is not being picked up in these conversations. It goes to core issues about how public services are delivered, how public services are funded in terms of how revenues raised, the levers that are available to councils, and the levels of discretion they have. So we're not all, the same organisations.
It really illustrates that sort of cycle that we're talking about here. Thanks for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Melissa Lanneray.
You're all very welcome here today. And again, being an ex-councillor in the Derry City and Strabane Council area, I'm only too well aware, in particular, that issue in terms of the support for the lack of rates capacity that we have in the likes of Derry City and Strabane and Omagh and Fermanagh and that as well too. And you'll forgive me that if I concentrate again too on the rural issues, because I live in a rural community in Castledearg, and we would have exactly the same issues in that area as what they have in the wider Fermanagh district and that as well. I'm only too well aware of the difficulties, in particular in terms of health provision, transport, and general communication and that, and the limitations that provides for, say, to our residents in that whole area. So that I asked the question, do you think that the current, we'll say, anti-poverty strategy has addressed the issues of rural poverty?
Do you want to say anything, Paul, and then I'll probably come in behind you?
No, it hasn't addressed the real poverty at all, because health is a big issue. Health, waiting lists, and that, high rent, mental health is a big issue getting in our area. Housing demand, we haven't got enough housing, social housing or that. And the other thing is, most of these houses that have been built today will have an impact because they're dependent on oil heating, and there's no other source of heating for that house. It's only oil. And the way things are going at the minute, oil's got very dear. I know a house, social housing in Omagh, there was an extra £700 spent on 4 houses in Omagh of extra heat oil from help from St Paul's to give them people help in hand. So we need extra into the area for rural areas especially. Rural areas seem to be forgot about a lot of times. And all kinds of all the departments, and all departments here needs to come together. DARD needs to come into this as well. It's not just DF's Department of Communities. It's all departments I think should be involved in this poverty strategy.
So for the members who are around the room today, I know there are some people who have rural constituencies, and I think when we were looking in advance, so I'm from County Fermanagh, but I've spent a good part of my adult life living around Belfast. So, and working in Belfast, poverty looks entirely different in those two places. And I think the point has to be, and this is possibly where the anti-poverty strategy does not adequately address rural poverty, is that it's not about rurality, it's about the structural issues that affect rural communities. And that's down to, if we're honest, that is down to decisions about investment. It's down to decisions about where transport infrastructure goes. And there are a lot of efforts currently being made to address those issues with regional balance, but that's going to take time. And I think the biggest concern that we have collectively is that the gap just keeps getting larger and larger and larger. And that's wrong, I think, fundamentally. So if we just shift it away from, it's not about living in a rural community. There's nothing wrong with living in a rural community. It's a good way of living and people choose it because of all the benefits. But these are structural issues that maybe need addressed.
Well, one of the comments that we actually had from the representatives now that have attended our committee meetings was, if anything, the lack of co-design. And that doesn't imply, we'll say for 1 second, that you have a blueprint that fits all. And in fact, just the opposite of anything, and that if it is to sort of to embrace the needs of rural communities and so on, then it wouldn't be a blueprint that will fit all. So do you have any suggestions there on how we can support more effective partnership, we'll say, within councils, just as it is suggested, to be within departments, within central government, but even within councils, in order to have a far better working relationship there and ensure that these issues are taken on board?
We could talk all day about that. We probably
Please don't,
could.
but please do.
We won't. Of course we won't. Of course we won't. If I keep it specific to the anti-poverty strategy, I think the opportunity here is, rather than undoing the strategy, is to work through the delivery structures and to make sure that maybe any absence of co-design is corrected whenever we think about the anti-poverty strategy board. So we want councils to have a seat at that table. We want to be represented as an equal part of government in terms of overseeing the delivery of the strategy, and then that will flow down into the boards. And obviously it would seem appropriate that one of the the subsequent boards would have a focus on rural living and how to address some of these issues as well. So we just want a seat at the table. I think also, as a political organisation, would be remiss of us not to remember that officers bring professional expertise and knowledge. That is not a substitute for the experience of elected representatives and the knowledge that they bring to the table. So it's important to reflect both the the impartial advice and guidance you get, but the experience that you bring to the table, as well as the experience of our councillors in that. So just give us a seat at the table.
Just finally, on that point, do you think that councils have been adequately given that opportunity to have that seat at the table? But more importantly, apart from having a seat at the table, is another thing that your recommendations are listened. Do you think that has actually happened, we'll say, currently, in terms of the draft anti-poverty strategy?
I think it would be wrong of us to say that councils didn't have any involvement in early discussions. So that would be a misrepresentation of our relationship with the department. So council officers were involved in some of the design of the strategy. I think where that probably it could have been strengthened is actually getting in at a much earlier stage. So quite often the co-design looks like coming to talk to us when drafts are in place. Timelines are pretty tight, and things need to get moved for whatever reason, and then it's what can we do with what we've got, as opposed to taking it right back. And then I think the opportunity in that then as well is actually how do you bring place-based approaches that recognise the very different variations in how the region operates actually as part of the strategy. So of course regional intent is important, regional policy intent, but we're all very focused on how that actually presents itself as places. Councillors and councils, that's their area of expertise, how to make it specific to a place. So I think the missed opportunity around our involvement would have been around bringing the place-based approach alive. So I don't want to suggest we weren't around the table at all. That isn't the case. There was discussion, just not at an early enough stage.
Okay, thank you, Marisa. Kelly.
Thank you very much. I was glad to hear that you were looking for a seat at the table, because I was going to ask about the anti-poverty strategy board that's mentioned in the document. I don't think it says it specifically within the response that you provided to the department, but do you think that it would be a key? It would be well done if councils had representation on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think I
missed
agree
opportunity if we didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think from my consideration, you've got the strategic aims of an anti-poverty strategy, and they have it's not just about delivery agents, because councils are part of that strategic as well. And that's what I wanted to ask on that. So obviously the consultation closed in September. You guys have been talking to the department. From my point of view as a scrutiny committee, I need to sort of see what's been happening since then. So since the consultation closed, has the department asked for any further information from councils? I'm particularly concerned that the rate setting process is over for this year. And if any money does come out of the budget, you're already into the financial year. So it's how much can councils now, given the workings of this financial year are already in place, how flexible and how quick can councils be to react to an anti-poverty strategy should one be released?
I think there's probably two questions in that. We're not aware of media engagement in the interim period since the consultation closed. There may have been kind of high-level discussions, but certainly not getting into the meat of how this would work in practice. And I think in terms of the funding perspective, just to pick up points that Matt has already made, councils will always be agile. It's whether that achieves the best intent and purpose whenever you have to make decisions that are quick, short term, and as you'll know from some very topical issues, we're often working with community and voluntary partners who need certainty, and some of the decisions that we make affect jobs and it affects livelihoods. So when councillors are having to make decisions about whether they can at risk release 50% of the money because it's the right thing to do, because if that infrastructure disappears, we don't have delivery partners anymore collectively. As government, we don't have those delivery partners anymore. So I think making sure that it comes at the earliest opportunity. We're not aware of the current circumstances, so we get that there's a lot happening, but we will be agile. Of course, we'll be agile, but it's missed opportunity, I think, is the key thing.
I have to declare an interest, as I was a former councillor with Ards in North Down, that has certainly pockets of deprivation, has some rural pockets, but it does have quite a good rate base in the fact that it has Newton Ards and Bangor. But one of the things I'm a little bit concerned about is, in the absence of the department's anti-poverty strategy and a Northern Ireland anti-poverty strategy, is there anything that you are concerned about as councils, as NILGA, about making financial decisions about what to invest in now that maybe aren't underpinned by anti-poverty objectives that may come at you later after the anti-poverty strategy comes out?
So we better let the councillors speak about what they're hearing. They're making these decisions every day.
So we do, in terms of concerns about what are the real issues that we're dealing with now. Paul's already alluded to it. For instance, the price of fuel, the price of costs, and all of that, and we have to actually respond to it. Maybe just to touch on the point in the last question as well around Kelly, the point that you made. Can councils respond in light of there not being funding and whatever? We as a council, and I'll speak from a Belfast perspective, and I know that Kevin Heaney was our officer that was in from Belfast, and he outlined very well some of the things that we had been doing as a council, and one of those was a community hardship fund. A community hardship fund that last year there was in the pot over £1 million of funding. A huge proportion of that was made available through the Department for Communities, but it was a one-off payment. It was a one-off payment. We then went into this year and we were looking at it and we had £70,000 left. So we went back to the Department for Communities and says, look, is there any chance? Can we get that £1 million back again? And it was clear it was put forward as a one-off payment to the council, wasn't recurrent, and it wouldn't be recurrent. But that doesn't mean the councils still aren't responding. Councils are agile enough where they are trying to respond within their means and all that they do. Do we foresee moving forward in light of there not being funding, being able to deal with things? No, I think we will try to deal with things. We probably wouldn't be able to deal with them as effectively without the proper resources to do so. But given those, then yes, absolutely, I think that we can respond to them.
One last question, Chair, and it is a procedural one, so forgive me. Well, if you can't answer it, that's fine. There was an issue where a council was provided with money for a social supermarket, and the department obviously comes to the end of the financial year and everything has to be spent by then. It's not the same with councils. Is there some flexibility that needs to be built into the work programmes that are identified on a place-based, position that can roll forward? So say, for instance, the case that I'm thinking about, there was over £100,000 was considered to be rolled over, but the department came back and went, well, no, not really. It has to be spent all by the end of the year, and that was stupid spending because it was knee-jerk spending. It was agreed and sorted out. Thank goodness somebody saw sense. But I'm just wondering, is there some flexibility in processes with regards to money? Like you talked about 70,000 being left, and you could continue that on. It's not zero balance at 31st of March. Is there something about process there that we need to be making sure that Assembly and Grant County flowing down is as flexible as you need it to be in order to deliver?
I think administration of any resources that come in the council need to be flexible, but it goes back to maybe the point I made about multi-year budgets. Given the certainty with multi-year budgets, you wouldn't be in that position.
Thank you very much. Thank you for answering those. I know they were procedural.
Thank you. So I've now a few additional indications from members, so if I could just ask everyone to be as succinct as possible now, please. I have Sian, Pam and Mark. Go on ahead, Sian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's lovely to see you all. I'm very fortunate to have been on 2 councils with at least 2 of the members on the panel. And that feeds in, I suppose, to the question that I have is around consistency. And consistency across councils. There is a balance to be had between those place-based interventions that are needed, but also then making sure that it's not a postcode lottery in terms of what council that you're actually in, dictating the support that you get. And I was just wondering if any of you could speak to, I suppose, how we navigate that balance and how councils should be navigating that balance. Is that going to be up to at a level at Solus? Is that going to be up at a level at the department? How do we make sure that we, whilst intervening and getting interventions that are specific and relevant, that we don't make, I suppose, a postcode lottery out of our interventions?
Go ahead. Maybe talk just to make a point, Alison. You probably give a wee bit more. Shannon, it's good to see you. By the way, I haven't seen you in a while. But I think that whenever we talk about we don't want a postcode lottery. Regional balance is very important in terms of making sure that we get resources spread right across areas, but done so based on objective need within areas where we're having to really drill down, have an impact in those areas of need. I mean, it's been well rehearsed here. A rural area is not the same as Belfast in terms of what those needs are. It may be transport, it may be other things, it may be infrastructure within a rural context, it may be food poverty, it may be something else within an urban context. And I think that as much as we can, we need to look at this in terms of objective need. We need to look at it in terms of regional balance to make sure that there is the ability for councils to respond that are less well off and have the ability to respond to that need. So,
maybe just to add to that then, Sian, lovely to see you again, that it's a balance, and I think obviously the department holds the policy intent, and it's for the department to strike the right balance between what's universally appropriate for all ratepayers and all citizens versus what allows for place-based flexibility. But I think what the space that allows the most creativity in that is outcomes, so holding people accountable for outcomes. So you're holding a council accountable for its performance in making and delivering change. How it does it really is irrelevant in my view to the department. That allows for recognition of different levels of resource availability, different levels of community voluntary infrastructure, different levels just of size and scale, and different councils and reflecting different needs. It also speaks to the point, I think, about what comes first. So I think Matt has already indicated that councils will already do this work in the absence of a strategy. They already have local priorities. What brings that to life then is that kind of regional consistency that comes from and that's where the two meet together, is the magic space, I think. And it's recognising, I think, just the sense that there are some universal basic rights that are appropriate in this space for all people, no matter what the circumstances or indeed your geography is. And then it is also right that people who experience particular disadvantage get additional support. So I think the two will come together and hit the magic space in the right way, but hold us accountable to outcomes. Don't start telling us, well, you should do this and do it this way, and you should use your funding exactly this way. Council are creative organisations. That's why you use us. So let us operate in that space, the creativity.
And I think, Alison, you made a really good point earlier on. It was around that councils being seen as partners in government rather than there being tiers and being a sphere. I really like that image, and I'm wondering, does it feed into at the minute that tiered approach that I do think
and not just in this department.
but I do think there's a tiered approach, and I'm wondering around the communications between all levels of government. Is there something that can be tapped into through the anti-poverty strategy in terms of how do we improve communications between local government and, I suppose, the department and the scrutiny committee that has the remit for local government?
So I'm not sure it's just about comms. So I think it goes to the core of the constitutional question about relationships. And if you'll indulge our kind of soapbox on this, so our Scottish colleagues about 18 months ago signed an agreement with their devolved administration which set out the shared priorities that were relevant to both sectors, how they would work together, and most importantly the values and behaviours that they would hold each other accountable to. Now we of course have partnership panel, but that is a structure. That does not let us challenge each other on, well, you know, why did you just cut our funding and didn't even give us notice? We'd no idea it was coming. And then, so we understand the financial situation in Stormont, but if we had a little bit of warning, we could try and troubleshoot around that. Values and behaviours. Our colleagues in Wales have just signed something similar. So we want to reset the relationship at a strategic level with regional government. We want an agreement that doesn't just talk about structures, but talks about the values and behaviours that we can expect of each other, and that allows us to hold each other accountable. Yep. I think that goes, sorry for the soapbox there.
Very good, okay, thank you. Thank you, Sean. I remember doing a transformation piece as an addition to my social work degree, and they were saying the traditional hierarchy that we see with someone here and then you have 3 strands and 3 bodies and then below, that's actually very disruptive in terms of communication progress. It actually should look like put your goal at the centre and then create a spider's web of interconnections. And I think if we got that in our heads, and I think that's partly to what you're speaking, that would be an important element to assisting transformative in itself, but also lead to greater transformation. Thank you. Coming now then to Pam. Go ahead, Pam.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies I missed the beginning of your presentation. Good to see you, Paul, and Alison, I know you two from way back when. We'll talk about how long ago on Antrim Council, one of the originals. But good to have you here today, and you've been very succinct and very clear, I think, in what's needed, and I think that's really, really helpful to this committee going forward. You've talked a lot about that cross-cutting nature of the work, about multi-year funding, about the those councils. I thought that was a very good point you were making around the rate support grant and the least financial flexibility and that discretion, how important that is for those particular areas. It does, you know, that is very helpful to you know, make very clear in your head what those issues are and how really, you know, one size doesn't fit all. It never has, and it never will, and there'll always be those inequalities as you go out to more rural areas, and I know that is a real difficulty. And Paul, you touched on the housing demand and you know, rent rates, oil dependence of the rural nature of all those issues. There's so many things in there, and it's good to have them outlined. But I suppose if each of you were the Minister of Communities, what would you make in terms of this particular topic? What would you make your top 3 priorities in terms of anti-poverty work? What would you see as your absolute top 3 priorities?
Who will we start with there? And just as brief as possible, please. So Matt, maybe, or
so what the three headings that we come in here today were around community planning, structural drivers, and councils as delivery agents. Okay, so in terms of priorities, all of the work that we do around those. Paul talked about rural poverty, and you've referenced some of the things that Paul talked about structural disadvantage. I think the most important thing for us is making sure that we're part of it in terms of identifying those priorities that you talked about. Priorities will change. They will change within council areas, and we've already talked about, you know, rural areas as opposed to urban areas and all of those different things. Councils themselves are autonomous bodies. They operate individually. Yes, as councils we all work together, but they work as individual bodies, and that is because there will be different priorities within different areas that they are working to. And the community planning partnership gives us that vehicle within those areas to try to drill down into those priorities. So I Pam, can't talk about individual priorities that should be the top 3 in an anti-poverty strategy, because they will be, you know, different across all areas and what we're trying to target and what we're trying to do. But certainly giving council a seat at the table in terms of delivery of that, helping to shape it and move it forward would be essential for us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think
So I'm actually not going to take 3 from each of you because you are here as an organisation. So if anyone wants to make it very brief, but I can't get too bogged down. And go ahead, Hazel.
I'll make a very brief statement that kind of covers the whole thing without being specific on individual points. And really, it underlines what's already been said in that local government really does stand ready to work collaboratively, and I think that's the important emphasis there, with central government on the development delivery of a strong, resilient and evidence-based anti-poverty strategy that has to be capable of addressing the structural causes of poverty and delivering sustainable pathways out of it for communities across Northern Ireland.
You and briefly, Paul.
Yeah, I agree with Matt was saying. It affects Belfast. It doesn't affect us in Fermanagh and Omagh. It's completely different in a rural area. And we are a big rural area, as you know yourself, Colin. You know.
Absolutely.
You know, and it's different issues. It affects us.
Taylor to suit. And I have time then for a quick one from Alison. What do you see as the priorities, Alison?
I think some of the best strategies to have been delivered in this region are executive strategies which recognise the cross-cutting nature of things. In an ideal world, we'd step back from this and recognise this does not sit neatly within one department, and that actually the best strategy will work with other ministers, and it will be delivered with executive oversight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam. And Mark.
Thanks for coming on. It's very interesting and useful contribution. I think it complements well the evidence that we've received from individual councils who all face individual challenges. I know we've spoken about the disadvantage in rural areas vis-a-vis that exists in urbans, and of course some councils, like my own council area, Derry City and Strabane, kind of gets the worst of both worlds in that regard. I'm glad, Alison, you raised the frustrations and concern around the rate support grant, because I think people here are fed up with me being the one that raises it, but certainly we'd be of the view, or I'd be of the view anyway, that should be reinstated and then ring-fenced at the executive level, as you have recognised across departmental responsibility to tackle poverty. I'm wondering, in terms of community planning, you've spoken of some of the strengths and successes of that model and function, but then do you have, therefore, examples and experience of where you might have, this is not the strength, the weaknesses, where you get local buy-in from a representative of a departmental individual or representative or organisation, that they buy in, they recognise the benefits and merit of an intervention or initiative, so they buy in, but then ultimately they can't pay in because when they go back to the department it doesn't meet their obligations.
I think this goes to the complexity of public funding and how the governance system operates. So participation in community planning partnerships is probably varied, is the best way to describe it. And that is often down to the individual at the table. Some organisations aren't structured in a way that supports participation in 11 different partnerships, and many organisations that are designated community planning partners are regional organisations, and they therefore don't have the people to sit potentially on multiple partnerships. But there are good people who see the benefit. Often you're right then when they go back and say there's this great initiative, we should co-fund that, we should plan this together and pool our money. It comes back to some of the bureaucratic challenges then around managing public funding, the roles of the accounting officers in the department, how complicated it becomes then when you start to merge budgets, and those are some of the issues that we also feel that need to be tackled. So it's not just about political decision making or indeed the intent of officers. There are some structural issues that prevent collaboration, and where it just becomes too hard. I think our answer is nothing's too hard, it just needs to be looked at differently. But yeah, it comes down to how money's treated in departments, accounting officer responsibilities, and how you facilitate collaboration in that space as well.
And just a point, I mean, we've talked about the agility of councils to be able to react. The community and voluntary organisations, for instance, who would deliver services can also be very creative in terms of how they deliver services as well. So where something doesn't meet the requirement in terms of how the department views that, organisations are very creative in how they deliver services. So I don't think that they will be found wanting, you know, whenever you're saying, you know, is there a barrier, is there a problem in terms of that funding? Yeah, there is, and it comes down to bureaucracy and it comes down to the accounting and all of that, but you won't be found wanting when it comes to a creative community organisation who want to deliver services. They'll be
found wanting
100%.
In terms of will.
Yeah.
But sadly, ultimately, we might at times be found wanting when it comes to way. But in terms of resourcing, I completely concur with the view that it should be kind of top sliced from departmental budgets. We've been pushing for the reinstatement of executive programme funds, one on anti-poverty and another on children and young people, because so often we have this kind of then tug of war between departments or what they have, and we'd all like every department to have more, but they tend to want to hold increasingly.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And listen, that's been a really useful session, I have to say. Just to note in relation to that issue, committee have taken a keen interest in the use of pooled budgets, and we have expressed that we want to see that done more, and we've asked for that to be included in revised guidance. We have also agree entirely with the fact that poverty to be addressed will have to be completely cross-cutting, and all departments will have to be pulling their weight and playing their role to the fullest extent. However, we're also keen to ensure that as the department responsible for bringing forward that strategy to the executive, that the Department for Communities really picks up on what they have heard throughout the consultation process, including what they've heard from local councils. And I think you've provided us with strong and clear messaging around what we would need to see in a revised anti-poverty strategy, because I think there was broad agreement that the strategy originally published for consultation didn't meet the needs of what many in our sector, including local councils, see as being needed. So that is where we're at in this stage of the journey. It's getting a strengthened, fit for purpose, effective strategy into the executive. So I just want to thank you for your work in terms of contributing to that goal, and appreciate your attendance here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, members, thank you. So I'm going to pick up then if there's any actions coming out of that members want to flag up or highlight. Can I check? We have our motion. Do we have any indication as to when our motion may be?
Not yet.
Okay, Kelly?
Could we write to the relevant people who are working on the anti-poverty strategy to ask them about the anti-poverty strategy board, to see if councils or a representative of councils will be invited to be part of that, given the whole government approach that's needed.
Members content?
Yeah.
Melissa?
Just on that, and it's probably along the same lines, just as Kelly's suggesting there, the statement that was made by Alison to reset the relationships between, for a combined effort between the structures of government. So, like, it was implying like that there's a need there for that. So quite clearly, it has to be in some way evaluated as well too. Just what are the relationships currently?
Yeah. So is that a comment, Melissa? Are you
comment? I'm not that sure how you actually would address that. You know, whether.
Well, I suppose we could include that in that letter. We include that concern to ensure that the department are engaging robustly with council to ensure there's good relationships.
Yeah, constructive relationships.
Yeah. The importance of it going forward, like I think we did hear in fairness that there is ongoing good work, but it could always be better, I think, is maybe the message. Andy first.
Yeah, Chair, if I can maybe just add 2 points to the letter going to the department, is maybe perhaps get a better understanding as to the timeline of engagement, because certainly it came through there that there was a feeling that the timeline of engagement around the development of the current strategy didn't happen at an early enough stage. And then just we've often heard a lot about the action plans, about the different strategies. If we can get a better understanding around the action plans and when the department anticipates engaging with the stakeholders such as and then the partners such as local government around their role in delivering on the action plans and importantly the targets and measurable outcomes.
Okay. So are members also content with that addition from Andy? And Pam?
Yeah, I'm not sure how you phrase it, but I suppose just on what Alison was saying in particular, she talked about the executive strategies being and that working across the departments, the importance of that, and also the rate support grant. So I think that something needs to go maybe to the entirety of the executive to stress the importance that this has across the departments, and clearly the work has gone out to the departments and is being fed back in, and that's right and proper. But I think that was just a good point that was made, that the opinion was that the executive strategies and working with other ministers was the way to go on this in particular, as opposed to being, yes, it does come under the Ministry of Communities, but there's much wider implications for all the departments. So it's just how we would word something to the executive as a whole to stress the importance of that, and I suppose also to stress the importance of ensuring that the funds are made available for the rates support grant as well, given the disparity amongst councils.
Yeah, so just taking the rate support grant first, and we have mentioned that several times. Are members content to reiterate our concern around the cuts to that rate support grant?
Yeah.
In terms of the executive, so I'm open to a discussion. However, I think we will certainly have a job of work to do in holding the executive to account for that cross-cutting work when there is a strategy. At this point in time, I'm really keen to ensure that there's a focus on the strategy itself, that it comes to executive fit for purpose in the sense of making a real difference, and then others have to definitely step up to the mark. So I'm just conscious of the timing in respect of that issue. Mark, Clark, were you looking to?
No, I just wanted to remind the committee wrote to the executive specifically on the subject of the rate support grant and seeking that it be ring fenced in the last couple of months.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have been very clear on that
after the review report the officials were in. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Chair, can I just ask too? Do we know? I know that the communities had written out to the other departments. Have all those responses? Do we know if the responses are back from that, or are they still outstanding? To the Ministry of Communities.
So the 7th of May is when we're due to get an update from departmental officials here, specifically on the progress of the anti-poverty strategy. And I was going to propose the committee collate these points now and send them to the department so that those can be responded to at that session if members were agreeable.
Yeah, I think that'll be useful,
For the 7th of May.
Yep. Okay, members, thank you for that. So that's been useful. I'll move on then to agenda item 6, which is SL1, Registered Rents Increase Order NI 2026. Initial correspondence to the SL1 was received on the 2nd of April during the Easter recess, and accompanying SR and EM were received on the 8th of April. Members should note, as part of the enhanced delegated legislation process, the agreed minimum 4-week period does not begin until after recess and until both the SL1 and draft SR have been received. Updated papers were received in time, and I think just maybe in time for table papers yesterday, and these relevant papers can be found starting at page 12 of the table papers. We have with us also from the department David Polly, and David's Director of Housing Supply and Policy, and Emma Sisk, and Emma's acting grade 7 in the private rented branch. So you're very welcome this morning. I'll not go through the purpose of the proposal as you're here, David and Emma, and could you take the committee through the detail of the proposal, and then we can move to members' questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting us. So you've already. So I suppose I want to start first with the procedural matter then. We sent this on the wrong SL1, and we're sorry for that. So that has slowed things up. So you now have the revised one, but you only got it yesterday. Also because of this, the proposed operational date was 8th of June, but the new processes mean that we won't now be able to get it in time for that. So we would be looking to get it in for the 6th of July. So I apologise to the committee, and I want to start off with that.
Okay, thank you, David.
So just to explain the background of the order, why it's necessary. In January this year, the Housing Executive approved a 4.8% rent increase for housing executive rents. The proposal before the committee is to apply that same increase to a small and specific group of rent-controlled private tenancies in line with established policy and legislation. So under the Private Tenancies Order 2006, the Department controls rents for a limited number of private tenancies. These fall into two groups: unfit private tenancies that began after April 2007 and properties built before 1945, and the protected and statutory tenancies, which is a list of protected and statutory tenancies. The proposal before the committee today applies only to those protected and statutory tenancies and only where the property meets the fitness standard. So if a property is not fit, it will not get a rent increase. By way of explanation, a protected tenancy is one where the original contract of tenancy was registered under the Rent Order 1978 or the Private Tenancies Order 2006 and is still in operation. In most cases then that means the present tenant is the original tenant, and a statutory tenancy occurs where the original tenant has died or the tenancy passes to an eligible successor, such as a spouse or family member who's often the tenant's widow or widower. And these tenancies provide a very high level of security against eviction and can only happen in limited circumstances and requires a court decision for eviction. So in terms of how many of these there are, and it is a fairly obscure bit of tenancy law, there's currently 451 properties on the rent register, of which 309 are fit, protected and statutory tenancies. So the proposal today would apply to 309 tenancies. In line with long-standing policy, only properties that meet the fitness standard are eligible for rent increases. No increase applies to unfit properties, reinforcing the principle that landlords must maintain properties to benefit from the higher rent. Under Article 55 of the Private Tenancies Order, the Department asked the rent officer, who looks after these statutory and controlled tenancies, to review the rents for these fit properties, and in doing so the rent officer considered housing executive rent levels, repair costs and other relevant factors. Traditionally, increases in registered rents align with housing executive rent increases, and the proposal before the committee follows that established approach. So applying a 4.8% rent increase would raise the average registered rent to £92.24 a week, representing an average increase of £4.22 a week. I'm going to hand over to Emma to talk a wee bit about the impact and the policy rationale.
Good morning, Chair and members. As David has said, I will now provide a brief overview of the policy rationale relating to the proposed 4.8% increase to protected and statutory rents. The proposed increase seeks to strike a balance between protecting tenant affordability and ensuring landlords can maintain properties to the required standard. This matters because good quality, well-maintained housing is closely linked to positive health and well-being outcomes, while poorly maintained homes can contribute to poor physical and mental health. Turning to affordability, it is important to note that protected and statutory tenancies already attract comparatively low rents, significantly below market rents in the wider private rented sector. On average, weekly rents in these tenancies are less than half those in the private rented sector more broadly. Data from the rent review shows that 43% of tenants in protected and statutory tenancies receive support with housing costs through housing benefit or universal credit, meaning the increase is likely to be met through corresponding uplifts in that support. For the remaining tenants not in receipt of housing support, affordability is addressed through the fact that protected and statutory rents remain broadly comparable to housing executive rent levels, where affordability is an important consideration in how rent increases are assessed. In summary, allowing modest rent increases for properties that meet fitness standards supports continued investment in maintenance and compliance with evolving safety requirements, including fire and electrical safety standards, helping to ensure the continued provision of safe and decent homes. Chair, that concludes my summary of the policy rationale, and I'll now hand back to David.
So, just to conclude, the statutory rule in front of the committee represents a modest and proportionate adjustment to rents for a very small number of fit, protected and statutory tenancies, aligning them with the 4.8% increase in housing executive rents this year. This increase supports a clear and long-standing policy principle that landlords who maintain properties to the housing fitness standard may benefit from modest rent increases while rents for unfit properties remain frozen. The Department has taken full account of its statutory obligations. There's no financial implications for the Department. No adverse impacts were identified in any of the assessments done. The rule is compliant with Section 24 of the Northern Ireland Act. This is a routine statutory rule. We do it every year since 2007, following the introduction of the Private Tenancies Order 2006. It reflects the rent officer's independent assessment and maintains consistency with housing executive rent policy. For these reasons, the Department believes the statutory rule is appropriate, justified and proportionate, and I would commend it to the committee. Okay. Very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, David. I'm not overly taken with the idea that it's okay because we've always done it. I think we should always be on the lookout for change and spotting of things, but anyway, that's a general comment. So, in terms of the 309 homes, what are the geographical spread of those 309 houses?
80%, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. In terms of the rural sort of urban breakdown, it's 80% urban, 20% rural, roughly over a third in Belfast.
Okay. And who is the rent officer for those homes then? Is it housing executive or DFC or who's?
A member of DFC staff.
member DFC. Okay. Is there, and I should declare that I own a private property from which I derive a rent, but is there a tension between providing additional support to private landlords from public funds, or is that deemed appropriate in the overall
We're
aim?
We're not providing any money from public funds. This would be rent paid by the tenants, so unless they are getting it paid for by housing benefit or universal credit.
Well,
housing
47%.
Yeah. So,
43% of them are.
Yeah. So that would be the same as everyone in the private rented sector. You know, that is an entitlement for an individual with support for their rent. Yeah.
Okay. And you see, in relation to then the 57% who sit outside of that, are there any affordability, and we're all very conscious of current cost of livings, but has there any analysis been undertaken on the affordability impact for those 57%? And I'm thinking particularly people on fixed incomes like pensioners, where potentially that could be quite a large. So what assessment has been done on that?
I suppose when the rent officer has been looking at this, the fact that the rents are so comparable to the housing executive rents, and that we know that the housing executive carries out robust analysis on affordability as part of their rent increases, which includes looking at tenants who aren't in receipt of benefit. We do take a level of assurance, or the rent officer would take a level of assurance from that. And I suppose in terms of looking at it as sort of a proportionate process, unless the rent officer would see really, really clear reasons to deviate from what the housing executive is doing, it would tend to follow the housing executive unless you could see a very obvious reason why that wouldn't be appropriate.
In very general terms, the rents are much lower than private market rents. The landlords do have costs, those costs go up. It is only fair that they are able to put their rents up in line with their costs, as long as they do their obligation and keep it to a proper standard. If you were to restrict them over a longer period of time, you would get deterioration in quality, and landlords would be unable, in some cases, to keep them up to a proper standard.
Yeah. And while rents may be lower, would it also be the case that potentially costs are higher in homes like this?
These are older homes, so it is quite likely that the costs are higher.
Okay, so I'm going to come to members here, Kelly, and then have Mark. Kelly?
I just wanted to check, for the increase in rent, what's the comparison for those that are on housing benefit? Have they gone over the housing benefit levels now for the areas?
Like LHA. I can't remember all of the broader BRMAs for the whole of Northern Ireland, but I mean the average is 6 or 7, 650, isn't it?
Yeah, I just was wondering if any of these ones, because if they're going up to 90, whatever it is, per week.
I don't have a breakdown for all of them. I would imagine almost all of them are under it. There are some of them which are larger, so I don't know how I would apply for that.
Okay. I just was thinking, because whenever it says earlier in the paper that we had received, you know, that there's no real cost implications, but for anybody, if this rent takes them over their housing benefit level, then that does have an impact.
I think the highest control rent would be £130 a week.
Okay.
So that some of them are as low as £20 a week. The rent is as low as £20 a week.
Okay.
So that would all be well within LHI.
And compared to what Belfast rents are at 800 to 1,000.
Well, Belfast rents are pretty much 1,000. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's nice. I just wanted to check that.
Thank you, Kelly. Mark?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks. Just want to ask about the unfit properties. Do we know how many of them there are? And just if a landlord won't invest to carry out repairs or maintain a property to ensure that it is fit for habitation, is £4 a week going to be enough of a carrot for them to do so? Or is there a stick as well? Why are they even getting the current rate if the property's unfit?
So there's 309 fit protected tenancies. There are 76 unfit protected tenancies, which is about 20%. And there are 66 unfit unprotected tenancies. So that's those older ones which have got notices of unfitness. The enforcement is by the councils. Councils can issue notices to bring houses up to standard. Part of the control then is in older houses. If a house fails a fitness stand, it gets an unfitness assessment by a council, the rents go down until it's brought back up again. So this overall process for the unprotected tenancies feeds into making sure landlords do what they're meant to do.
And so if council can enforce, do we know if they are enforcing? Has there been a reduction in the number of unfit properties year on year, or is it going up?
So there's about 140, isn't it? 130. with a number that low, it would be hard to say. I haven't noticed any trend one way or the other. I mean,
the same properties just sitting unfit.
Some of them.
Still getting
I was talking to the rent
rent.
officer about this on Tuesday. He said some have sat unfit for a while, and so if the tenant, in some cases, the tenant seems content. Their rent is very low, and whatever it is, which is unfit, they are prepared to live with. And so I know it's sometimes difficult to imagine that.
No, I have experience of it, I think. No, that's okay. Just want to clarify around that.
It's quite hard in some instances to get a tenant to agree to an improvement to your house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Council
And
officers
none of
go
that.
to quite a lot
Sometimes
of
the
trouble.
improvement will require a decampment to somewhere or something. I get that, but I do think there's something bizarre when we're paying rent to someone for a property that's unfit.
We restrict it.
Hey, you restrict it, but it's still paid.
Hey, Kelly.
Just a very quick one. In order for a home to be part of this registered rents, how do they apply for that, or can anybody else join it now?
No.
No, it's closed off.
Basically, there were start a housing history lesson, but it sort of came in the First World War,
Yeah.
and then we ended the rent control system, and we moved to we deregulated our private rent. And since then, there's a lot more private rentals. The numbers greatly increased. This sort of looked back retrospectively and said, well, we're not going to change the conditions of people who are already in houses.
Okay.
So we're still decades later living with the people who have been there since then.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of the number of housing executive houses that are pre-1945.
Just to add to that, sometimes people can, if their property meets the criteria for protected tenancy, they can contact the rent officer, and the rent officer can assess that. So you might get small numbers coming back onto the register, but really over time these numbers have been dwindling, and there's been a reduction
Our list,
on last year.
Not that our list, we made a list at one point in history and that was it.
Yeah.
You know, it was our list as the ones we are aware of that meet the criteria in the legislation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and why was 4.8 then selected as the appropriate uplift? Is that linked in any way to actual maintenance cost, or is it simply mirroring housing executive rent increases?
I mean, from my point of view, it was a recommendation by the rent officer, who's independent, who does it independently. She based it on the housing executive, so that is to take into account things like the cost of construction inflation, the price of getting people to do things, so generally that sort of thing. And as Emma said, when the housing executive proposes to the department what it wants its rent increase to be, you know, there is an exercise done around affordability, to what extent, you know, housing benefit thing will move up as rents go up as well. So more people will be brought into eligibility, so there's a bit of work done about that.
Yeah. And just to sort of follow on from Kelly in relation to the whole succession issue separate, which we've come across in relation to the housing executive, but does this scheme apply to the property or the person? So if someone passes away and their children, for example, are living in the house, is it still attached? Is the scheme attached to the property or to a person?
You can succeed. Do you want to, how often?
Yes, so the rules, it used to be 2, Chair, and then it changed to 1 after the PTO.
What do you mean, Emma? Sorry, it used to be 2.
Prior to the PTO, you could have 2 successions.
Okay.
Post PTO, it's 1. So my understanding is that the rules are that the person must be living with the tenant for 6 months before they pass away, and then it can succeed. So quite often, I think that's David was saying, you know, you find it's maybe a widow or a widower who takes on the tenancy, and I think that's part of the reason they're probably reducing over time as well, because of the limits on succession.
Okay, and final one from me then, and I just want to reiterate, so it's our job to ensure that this is still okay, even though it's happened and it's managed and done. So in terms of that there's been no consultation or full equality impact assessment, how can you be confident that the increase doesn't disproportionately impact vulnerable people?
I suppose the 2-part answer to that. This first one is that if we were to change the policy and what we were doing, that absolutely would need consulted on. Different bits of that in the past has been suggested that we might want to look at different bits of that, but we're not doing that. I mean, this rule is just to do the existing policy, which is to do an annual uplift, and for the rent officer to carry out that function. So we're not changing any substance. So that's why, that's part of the answer. The other part of the answer is, in terms of knowledge about who lives in these. We know where people are rural, in terms of rural and urban terms. We don't have people didn't have to fill in a Section 75 form whenever they registered their tenancies. So we would have very limited information about the nature of people who live in these. We know they're older. I suppose another part of the answer would be that they are protected. So, this is a group that is protected. So if we were doing an assessment, we'd say this group's protected compared to other people. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that covers it. As David says, these are there are very strong protections within these tenancies compared to anything else that you'll find in the private rented sector. They're some of the lowest rents that are going to be available within compared to the private. Even some housing associations, social housing, these are less expensive. So and the data that we do have, we're more reliant really on the data that's available for the PRS more broadly. We can make some kind of assumptions that we think maybe older people are living in these properties. But like I say, it is a sort of thing that we do take a level of assurance from the housing executives' assessments around affordability. They have a very broad tenant base. And so I think that's the sort of way that the rent officer approaches it. Like I say, that unless they can see a very clear reason why you would deviate from that, then it's your housing executive.
Yeah, and just let me be clear. So I'm not suggesting that we remove this support. What I'm saying is we're very keen to ensure that the support is still appropriate and still doing what it needs to do. So just that's the perspective. Okay, I don't see any other indications from members. So thank you, David and Emma. Thank you for attending committee and for setting that all out so clearly for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So. Moving on then, members, to is there any further comment members wish to make, or can we go ahead to asking that the SL1 was received on the 2nd of April during recess, where recess is discounted from the 4-week period? Are members content to agree an extension of the 4-week consideration period?
Agreed.
The team will then calculate the timing of the next consideration. However, it is important to note that the operation date is no longer 8th of June, it's now the 6th of July.
Just one wee thing, Chair. We're talking here about a small number of properties, and obviously I'm not seeking a list of addresses. Obviously there'd be issues with that, but could we seek a breakdown of just where they are per constituency or council area?
Yeah, well, we got was 80 urban, yeah, I think we could.
It's an 80-20 breakdown when we asked about the geographical
Yeah,
spread.
but where?
By council, okay.
All right, it might be better by constituency than council, given, like, say, Derry Strabane, for example, or such.
Yep. I was content we seek that, just information. Okay. So are members content that the citizen space call for views and the SL1 and any relevant papers from the department are published?
Yeah.
The citizen space consultation will issue from today, 23rd of April, and will close at midnight on the 7th of May 2026. Are members agreed?
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I just ask a question on that? The department have said that there's no need to consult on that. We obviously do with any of our things that we're looking at. Is there anything that we need to add to that citizen space to say that this is not in place of a departmental consultation, it's just our part? I'm just very aware that if any of these 309 people are not happy with that, it's not us, it's not our proposal.
Chair, yeah. So the citizen space, we ask specific questions. Yeah. They're identical questions for every rule, and they're in terms of whether it's technically correct. We're not seeking views any wider than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Members, have any further comments at this stage?
No.
Thank you. So moving on then, members, to our first SR, and just as a reminder, today's rules all commenced scrutiny under the new process for delegated legislation post-January 2026. So agenda item 7 is SR 2026-65, the Universal Credit, Personal Independent Payment, Job Seekers Allowance and Employment and Support Allowance, Claims and Payments, Amendment Regulations, NI 2026, a copy of which is at page 33. Can I remind members the committee considered the SL1 at meetings on the 19th of March and 26th of March 2026 in line with the new process for scrutiny of delegated legislation. Following consideration of the proposal, the committee confirmed it was content for the department to proceed to make the rule. The Examiner of Statutory Rules report in relation to this rule can be found at correspondence item 11.14. page 321 of the meeting pack. Have members any objection to the rule? Can I therefore ask formally that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2026/65, the Universal Credit, Personal Independent Payment, Job Seekers Allowance and Employment and Support Allowance, Claims and Payments Amendment Regulations, NI 2026, and has no objection to the rule? Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Agenda item 8 is SR 2026/68, the Social Security Removal of Two-Child Limit Consequential Amendments Regulations, NI 2026. A copy of the SR is at page 46, and can I remind members that the committee considered the SL1 at meeting on 26th of March 2026 in line with the new process for scrutiny of delegated legislation. Following consideration of the proposal, this committee confirmed we were content for the department to make the rule. Do members have any objection to the rule? Then I will therefore formally put the question that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2026/68, the Social Security Removal of Two-Child Limit Consequential Amendments Regulations, NI 2026, and subject to the report from the Examiner of Statutory Rules, has no objection to the rule. Are members agreed? Yep. Members agreed. Thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item 9. A Department of Education retention and disposal schedule. Members, this schedule was considered by the Committee for Education at our meeting on the 15th of April, when members indicated they were content with the schedule. A memo in relation to this approval can be found at page 57 of the meeting pack. Are members content to approve the schedule?
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you. So members, just before we move on to agenda item 10, matters raised, I may take a short comfort break, just 5-minute break. So if we could ask Clerk to take us out of broadcasting maybe for that break.
Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, Sound.
Private and VC to keep chatting here.
Is Jerry going again?
Yes. I couldn't tell you that, but I'd be away.
Well, because Stuart's going again, sounds like. Stuart's going.
I was like, I didn't expect that.
11 years.
It's weird, it is weird.
No, I'm throwing part.
It is weird.
Okay. Not any better.
Thank you, members. So we're resuming our meeting then at agenda item 10, matters arising. Members, you've been provided with a summary table of matters arising at page 125. I intend to go through each of those individually, as received a series of responses from a range of different sources to committee queries. So I'll ask for comments as I go through them all individually, and we're going then individually from 10.2 to 10.14. So quite a few of them, so we'll work our way through them. 10.2, members, is a response from the department regarding proposals to provide an indefinite disregard in relation to the mother and baby institution schemes in the 26 counties. Members, have any comments or views you'd like to raise? Kelly?
I was just going to say, when I noticed in the letter, I don't think it was copied to the Executive Office. Can we send a copy of this to the committee for the Executive Office, just so they're aware?
Clear. Yeah, members content?
Right.
Yeah, thank you, members. Item 10.3 is from the department regarding the reclassification of winter fuel payment for Social Security coordination. The department said that Irish nationals living in Britain will continue to be able to claim the winter fuel payment if they meet the domestic eligibility criteria in the UK, they've said there actually. Do members have any comments or any views they'd like to raise? Thank you. Item 10.4 is from the Department of Health regarding Inspire Wellbeing's request for a joint committee briefing Is that item 10.4? Yeah. Yeah. In regards to supported housing, the response covers issues raised by Inspire and the department's longer term targets in relation to supported accommodation. It also suggests that Inspire Wellbeing be directed to the Committee for Health to seek a briefing. So the members of any views are content that we direct them to the Health Committee? Content. Thank you. Item 10.5 is from the department regarding the Social Housing Developments Programme and the review of design standards to the changing demographics and an ageing population. Do members have any comments or views? I think that my only comment on that is that I think we need to keep a very close eye on that. It is a hugely important issue. I heard some discussion this morning about cancer rates increasing, and it's a result of demographics. And I've been thinking to myself, but we know the demographics. We should be planning for. I know that's a health issue, but similar in communities, we know the demographics. We need to be actively. Go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to say there is an issue here. We have a number of family homes that are being lived in by people who are allowed their day, and I'll declare an interest. My dad's one of them, so he's living in a housing executive family home, and has his day in it. But if there was an alternative, cheaper place to heat and to keep, that would be an option. My concern is that this reduction in the percentage of homes, I think it'll be a bit short-sighted, because there's already a considerable number of housing executive homes that are under-occupied by people who are being given their days, who would happily shift out into somewhere else if the options were there. So I think it is something, Chair, as you're right, we need to keep a wee eye on, because I don't think that the figures necessarily reflect the reality.
Thank you, Kelly. Item 10.6 then is a longer response from the department regarding the anti-poverty strategy and social inclusion strategies, regarding target setting and the need to embed the principles of the Children's Services Cooperation Act into these strategies to tackle child poverty. Members have any comments in relation to that? Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just don't think that this really answered the questions that we had in the letter. We asked who will set the targets, how the co-design will be embedded, how the departments will be held to account under CSCA, and those to me are really fundamental questions about delivery, accountability, and as per that answer, they still remain unanswered. So it just raises real concerns for me about whether the architecture and the structure there to make this strategy work is actually currently in place. So I don't know whether there's anything at this moment in time that we can go back to the department with, because they just don't seem to have answered anything that we actually asked in that letter. So I still want to know who is going to be setting the targets and who will be ensuring that accountability will be ensured there, really, particularly around that Children's Services Cooperation Act. Who is it within the department that will fall to?
Yeah, and should we include that on the list of issues we're flagging to the department for that session on May 7th, so that we can expect to get maybe some better clarity? Because I think you're right, there is a lack of detail there.
Yeah,
Members
absolutely.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Item 10.7 then is also a response from the department, and that's regarding the children and young people strategy and data development plans. Do members have any comments in relation to that item? No, thank you. 10.8 is from the department regarding an updated consultation timeline on the heritage, culture and creativity policy. The department has said that preparation in relation to each of the 4 policies that form the first phase is at an advanced stage. There's also further information in the table pack in correspondence on page 34, item 11.19, in relation to a public consultation on the first of the associated policies, which is museums. So, members, any comments on the note of embargo on that item? Sian?
Yeah, Chair, it won't surprise anybody to know that I'm a bit disappointed in this. I have had numerous contacts from people in the sector who are really frustrated. I have brought up the fact that we had an extensive engagement process when the department went out to consultation and really worked through what I think was a really effective process when they put out the Investing in Creative Delivery. I know that wasn't the same as actually having a policy document. The sector are saying they are consultation out, but yet are still waiting. This was billed. Investment in Creative Delivery was, I think, July 2023. The department then came out in July 2024 to say that they will be coming up with some of this work in terms of the policies. We were told that we would have, by the end of last year, these policies in place. If the committee remembers correctly, we had 2 engagement sessions with that team postponed. I don't feel that we are getting the in-depth detail over what work is actually going ahead when it comes to these policies around our heritage and culture. And I know the minister, when I asked him this question at oral questions on Tuesday, said that this will be hopefully finished by the end of the summer. The sector are just saying that they just feel a bit rudderless at the minute. There was the letter of expectation to the Arts Council that raised, I think, just worries about how the link between the department and the sector was actually happening, and now we have these policies still not in place. 3 years on from a document that was billed to be the foundation of the department's policies for arts, heritage and culture going forward.
Yeah.
I just think that it's really, really disappointing, and especially given this committee's engagement with the arts sector. And I think this committee's engagement with the arts sector has been very thorough, and I know that there is a real sense of gratitude and respect from the sector in how the committee has dealt with this issue. But I just think there is a real growing sense of frustration at a lack of direction from the department.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you. I think there's actually an inherent risk even in bundling them in this way, and that's then added to, because they're all very unique and different in many ways, and then that's added to by lack of clarity around each of the elements. So I was wondering, given there's certainly a lack of clarity around coordination timeframes for each of the strategies, and they're each key, how would members feel about asking the department to provide a clear, consolidated timetable for the remaining HCC policy consultations and subsequent delivery stages, including key milestones and expected completion dates, to break those down?
And I did ask that in the chamber as part of my oral question on Tuesday. And again, it was that vague that the minister was expecting this process to be completed by the summer, but that isn't giving us a clear deadline, clear timelines, and the objectives of delivery as well. You know, I just don't feel that there's clarity there, so I would support that, Chair.
Members content, Pam?
It was just to declare an interest. I'm a named director on a production company, and a family member on the board of the Arts Council, so that was it. Nothing else relating to.
Thank you, Pam. Okay, members content, we seek that detailed itemised breakdown around those timelines. Thank you. Item 10.9 then is a further response from the department on cross-departmental work being carried out on the anti-poverty strategy and social inclusion strategies, specifically in relation to cross-departmental work and the anti-poverty strategy board. The department has indicated that a paper with an updated strategy will be shared with the executive as early as possible, and in the first quarter of 2026-27, so that's September to December 26. Department officials will be in attendance to brief the committee further in relation to the ongoing work on updating the draft strategy at our meeting on the 7th of May. So do members have any comments or views they'd like to raise with the department? And I suppose I just want to say initially that I'm really concerned at further slippage and in getting something over the line meaningful in this mandate. I think it's really important we keep the pressure on that to deliver. Kelly?
Yeah, I just wanted to raise, I think there's something that we need to watch for this. I know that the all-party group on homelessness, we had a cross-departmental consideration on what was happening with homelessness, and some of the other departments come along and they say this is what we're already doing. It's not what they're proactively going to do to enable their bit to be delivered. So I think on this one we just need to watch to see what the content is from the other departments, that it's not a tick box exercise and there's actually something being driven forward by the strategy. Because they can say that, oh, we're doing this and we're doing this and we're doing this. Well, yeah, but it's not bringing down poverty. So I think we just need to make sure that we're aware of what the strategy objectives are, and are they doing anything new?
Yeah, I think the original draft strategy contained multiple references. We will continue, and I think that is a concern, that this is just a conglomeration of current actions. It has to be new and to make a difference. Okay, thank you. And clearly that session on the 7th of May will be key to some of these. So that's useful that that's in the diary. Item 10.10 is a response from the department regarding impact assessment on the local growth fund. As the fund is developed and delivered by the British Government, the Department does not have specific information of the potential impact of planned reductions being delivered directly by community and voluntary sector organisations here. Do members have any comments or views in relation to that? Go ahead, Kelly.
I don't understand why there isn't any understanding of the potential impact, because a number of these organisations are people that are delivering programmes for communities, especially access to employment. Fair enough, it's Westminster's policy, it's Westminster's funding, but if our minister is losing community and voluntary sector organisations and skilled workers because of another fund has been pulled, surely that has an impact on his delivery abilities through the grants that he's paying out. So maybe it's too early to say yet, but I am concerned that it's just being, the impact is just being set aside whenever we know it is like 600 odd jobs we're going.
Well, should we request that the department carry out an impact assessment to get an understanding of how that's going to impact groups?
I think we need to be careful in what we're asking for. We're not asking for an impact assessment on the loss of the local growth fund. It's an impact assessment on the organisations that the department grant fund for their objectives. Have those organisations, because of other funding implications, is that having an impact on his delivery?
So impact on delivery, impact
Yes.
on delivery.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark.
Again, it's bizarre that they don't have at least a potential impact analysis done, and then without that you wonder how much of an argument could have been made with Westminster to retain the funding at the level it was at, or that as well. It's just bizarre. I know they've said now that he's not going to do the analysis until after the fund allocations. Can we then maybe try to establish when those funds are going to be allocated?
Yeah.
I haven't heard word of who's got them yet, but I thought it was done. Because we're due to get their money from the 1st of April.
Yeah, that would. Or not.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's the people that got it, or organisations are probably afraid to say so. But I mean, was it just a standard cut across all the organisations, or if there's just some projects, like, these are good to go, and others, no, sorry.
Do we have any sense of when the department would assess it as being able to be assessed, if you know what I mean?
After the allocation.
Bottom of page 162 says once the fund allocations for 26-27 are confirmed, the department will assess how this may affect the delivery of departmental objectives around employability.
Okay, so Clerk, do you have clarity in relation to what we're seeking there at this stage?
We have asked specifically on the impact on the department's ability to deliver its employment programmes, and then we asked the employment programmes specifically for those who are disabled. So we've asked both those questions.
Yeah, okay, so those are in the pipeline. Okay.
We can follow it up once the fund allocations have been made.
Yeah.
We can flag that for again.
Yeah. Yeah, put that
Okay.
as a trigger to follow up on that. Thank you. Okay, item 10.11 is another response from the department regarding the review of homelessness legislation. Do you have any comments or views you'd like to raise? I've already declared the interest there, but I think it's disappointing that there's not more happening in this space. It's clearly an issue that continues to grow, homelessness, and obviously affecting people individually, affecting families, and also extremely expensive in terms of the temporary accommodation and the responses. So,
just on that, Chair, you've mentioned the expense or cost of temporary accommodation, and I know the Housing Executive are doing their bit in terms of acquiring 600 properties across 3 years. Now, I've asked some questions about that and not got really any clarity to date. But I wonder, could we establish of the properties acquired so far, and the Minister says to me they are on target, so therefore 150 were acquired.
None have been acquired so far, is my understanding.
He'd said that to me in the Assembly. I think I'll dig that out. But how many people are being displaced by the acquisition of these properties and effectively made homeless by it? It's my understanding there's a property in Derry changed hands recently. 10 people, well, there were more than one person in every flat on it, were made homeless, and now it's going to be used, I believe, for temporary housing.
Okay, so members content we seek that information around it, and you're content, Claire?
In terms of the new homes being bought, how many people are being displaced as a consequence of the acquisition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, members, 10.12 is another response from the Department regarding universal credit help with health costs and the range of communications initiatives in relation to its advertising campaign. Do members have any comments? Yep.
Yeah, right. I was worried about this because there wasn't a lot of information coming out about it. I now have a situation, a case where a dentist asked someone if their PIP was still valid. Like, nobody is telling the providers of the health services what's going on with this. Now, this isn't for Department for Communities because obviously it's health, but I'm just wondering what we can do with that, because I know we're a committee for communities, but can we write to the Department of Health and ask them what information has been provided for dentists and other like opticians and so on that are able now to provide this service? Yeah. Because that dentist clearly had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, and access to dentistry is so difficult. Anyway, any further barriers or hindrances would be worrying. Are members content we write in that?
Yeah. If we could, yeah.
Okay. Item 10.13 is another response from the Department regarding the home heating oil support package and an updated brief from the Minister. Mm-hmm. The Department has indicated that as they are working through the policy and delivery mechanism for the package, they would not be in a position to provide additional information to members on the 23rd of April. Any comments or views members want to raise? Kathy?
Yeah, Chair, I want to raise concerns, basically how the Minister and the Department have handled the committee's request for information on the home heating support package, and specifically under this item, but also in correspondence. I think it's 11.8 and 11.9 as well. Like, we agreed last week that we want officials to come before us to set out what this current state of play is. We all know vulnerable people out there are suffering. For the Department's response to say it would not be a productive use of members' time, that baffles me. Why is it for the Department to decide what's a useful use of our time? That's for the committee to decide. And we decided last week that we wanted the officials before us. I think this just shows again the culture that this Minister is dismissive, is obstructive, and a real disregard for the scrutiny role of this committee. Like we seen last week, the package announced 36.4 million for home heating oil users. That's positive, but it's absolutely productive use of members' time in this committee to get an explanation of how this is going to be delivered, how we're going to get this out, what the timeline is, what safeguards are in place for those most vulnerable people. It's not just us, I think the public deserves that clarity as well. Like, we've heard more about this in the media. We've heard more in the Nolan show before the executive meeting than this committee has been given any respect. I think we need to call it for what it is, and it's a clear attempt by the Minister again to avoid scrutiny. And I don't think it's acceptable, and I would like us to go back to the Department again and reiterate that, the importance of us having clarity, and that we aren't happy with the tone and the disregard that we're getting.
Any other thoughts, members, on that? Yeah, I have to say I agree with. I think it's totally unacceptable for the Department to advise members what's best use of their time. That's our role as Scrutiny Committee. I welcome the fact that additional money has been added by the Department of Finance. I welcome the fact that there's a scheme out there and that the Department are now working on how that scheme operates. There is a concern around several months have been mentioned, and I think it's a very important role of this committee to scrutinise that process to ensure people get that funding as soon as possible, because they need it right now. Any further delay is harmful in that sense. Kelly and then Mark.
Just very quickly, I think we just need to maybe in that letter is remind the Minister and Department about timescales for interaction between the Assembly committees and departments. That's an official document. Paragraph 4 says departments should therefore seek to engage with their committees on relevant policy, legislation or budgetary proposals or on other significant issues at the earliest opportunity. Surely this is the earliest opportunity. And even to know what their thinking is. I don't know how they're going to identify people who are not on benefit but are on less than 30,000. You know, so is that HMRC? What's the costs involved with that? What can we do to support? I just think that there is a paper there that outlines what that relationship is supposed to be, and I think we just need to remind them that we are a scrutiny committee. It is our legal duties to do this, and there's a document that confirms what we can expect.
Thank you, Kelly. Mark?
Yeah, and you've quite rightly highlighted the scrutiny function of the committee, but the other element is the support one, that the department or those designing the scheme might actually benefit from a session with committee to help, I suppose, shape it and strengthen it.
Yep. Members content that we issue a letter? Clerk, you're content with the detail?
Yes,
yep.
And the timescales for interaction document again, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and lastly, members, then is item 10.14. It's a draft press release in relation to our report on homelessness and supporting people programme. Can I ask members to review the draft press release at page 174 of your pack?
Yes, please.
And then to ask members if they are content to agree the press release?
Yes.
Yep, thank you. Okay, and also can I ask our members content for the committee team to work with communications colleagues to distribute this as appropriate, to include any embargo which will be needed to tie in with a date for our plenary motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, members, that concludes matters rising for today, and moving on to correspondence. And unlike that, then I'm going to go in terms of bundles in correspondence. So I'd like to ask if members want to draw out or highlight any specific item of correspondence in relation to the bundles. So I'm going to start with the first bundle, which covers items 11.2 to 11.9. The first item I want to draw out in that bundle is 11.2, which is an invite to a theatre event in the MAC regarding homelessness in the private sector. The event is taking place on 21st of May, and members should respond individually if they wish to attend. Items 11.8 and 11.9 are copies of the broadcast transcripts of the Minister's interviews with BBC Radio Ulster on 16th 17th of April regarding the home heating oil support scheme for members' information. And it is noteworthy that there's significantly more information contained in those transcripts than committee were provided pre-Easter. So 11.2 to 11.9, members, any items members wish to raise? Members content with the memo? Thank you. In relation to items 11.10 to 11.15, there's a couple I want to draw out there. 11.11, which is correspondence from an individual in relation to the Social Security operating order. Would members be agreed we write to the individual to thank them for the contribution and ask for the permission to forward this correspondence to the department?
Yeah.
Thank you, members. Item 11.13 is correspondence from the department regarding our request for senior officials to brief the committee on 30th of April due to the Minister's non-availability. The department has confirmed the officials will be in attendance and is asking committee for a list of any specific topics they wish to discuss at next week's session. So, do members have any particular topics they would like to raise with officials? I know two of the ones I would be seeking to raise: the anti-poverty strategy, certainly, and the Irish language strategy. I'd be very keen to discuss those. So I'd like to now let me set that out that doesn't preclude members from asking anything they want in the session. But if there's detailed answers that members want to specifically have information ready for, it's an opportunity in that respect. Kelly?
Just at this stage, I'm used to providing questions in advance, but you're right. All of the social strategies, just an update on all of them, because some of them I know that they're being treated with less priority. The other thing I wanted to discuss with the department is option B for the housing executive. Treasury has not come back yet through Finance to agree to the borrowing powers. And earlier we talked about rents being increased because that helps with maintenance. What it was mentioned before, I think John had mentioned it before, that they did have an option B that was in consideration. It would be good for the committee to know what that is.
Yep. Okay. Can I also ask if members wish to draw attention to any other item from 11.10 to 11.15? No, thank you, members. Members, then you've also been provided with a table correspondence memo at page 28 of your table papers with further items of correspondence from 11.17 to 11.12. So I'll take that as one bundle. Couple that I want to draw out is 11.17, which is a reminder to an event on maximising community space in the Lochshore Marina Centre, Ballyronan. The event is taking place next Wednesday, 29th of April. Members should respond individually if they wish to attend. 11.18 is a memo from the Committee for Justice regarding family court system and child maintenance service. As the individual's correspondence particularly flags reform of the child maintenance service to improve transparency, accountability and flexibility in its assessments, it may be worthwhile sending this on to the department for either a response or briefing if members are content. Yep, Sian, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I had asked the Minister a while ago to detail any further legislation, including the commencement of the operational regulations that we had had a consultation on them a good while ago. It was around the Child Support Enforcement Act relating to those administrative liability orders, and to try and get a timeline for when they were going to come in. If we're forwarding this on to the Minister, could we also ask them for a timeline of when those administrative liability orders will be coming into effect? The department had said that the DWP are working with courts and tribunals and the Scottish Government to establish a process for implementing them, and they wanted to introduce them as soon as possible. But I just think that it would be really useful to get a timeline on those, because it is directly relating, obviously, to the child maintenance issue and the things that are involved in this, or that I suppose that factor into the correspondence that we've received.
Members content with that to be included? Yeah, and are members content to respond to the Justice Committee informing them of our decision and action in relation to this? Mm-hmm. Yeah. 11.20 then, just before I come to members, 11.20 is correspondence from Queen's University regarding the termination of jobs due to funding cuts in relation to Place Names ANI project. I have to say I find this extremely disappointing and concerning that we are informed that funding will be available only until summer 2026, and I think we need to get clarification from the department. Is that going to continue on beyond summer? I know they have indicated to others that due to budgetary issues there's that, so I think we need clarity here. This is a very, very important service, obviously regionally. So can we get clarification from the department as to why this funding has been stopped from summer? Members content? Agreed. Thank you, members. So I want to check then, members, that bundle in table pack 11.17 to 11.21. Are there any other comments members wish to, or items members wish to raise? Okay, Clerk, are you content there with that last bundle? So members are otherwise then content with the memo, the correspondence memos in both tabled and main pack. Okay, members, that concludes correspondence for today, and we're moving on to agenda item 12, Forward Work Programme, a copy of which is at page 332. Do members have any comments, or are you content to note the Forward Work Programme? Content, thank you. Any other business, members? Item 13.
Sorry, I was just going to say, yesterday I had the pleasure of meeting with Deaf Blind UK. Robbie Butler had an event. He's chair of the All-Party Group on Visual Impairment. It was just that I was asked to pass on thanks to this committee for the work that had been carried out on the sign language bill. Deaf blind people, it's what they described it as, if you think of deaf people as yellow, it's very strange, and blind people as blue, when you put them together you don't get yellow blue, you get green, and it's a completely different thing. So they were very grateful for the recognition that there are people who are deaf blind who will only need tactile communication you know, when their hearing gets to a stage when they need to do it. But they were very appreciative of that, and they'll be coming back on an annual basis, and will probably get in touch with us. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I just check, Claire, in relation to the session coming up, are you content for members to send, if there's any other items that they want specific detail from the department coming?
Oh, a list of topics, yes.
Yeah, if
please,
members want
there's
to,
anything
if anything occurs to members following
Please,
this,
yeah.
do send those through.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to put a cut-off date on that, or?
Probably by Monday.
So by Monday, if members have anything else that they want to flag to the department that they want to have detailed answers on, by Monday send that through.
We have the department next week, and then
the anti-poverty strategy of the week after.
So senior officials in lieu of the minister next week.
Okay.
Has the minister rescheduled?
No, he's confirmed a date for June.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, members, so thank you for that. Agenda item 14 then is date, time and location of the next meeting. Our next meeting will be 10 a.m. Thursday, 30th of April here in room 29. And members, as our final agenda item is a background briefing from Raise on the PAFR bill, I propose that we now move into closed session. But I just do want to say before we go into closed session, I was in the chamber during the week and there was reference to research and in relation to another item. But I just want to say that I want to put on record my appreciation for the work that Raise do, the professionalism of it, the integrity of it, the independence of it, and how clearly it's communicated to us. So I just want to make that very, very clear and on the record. So if members are content, we'll move into closed session now and take the briefing from Raise. Members content? Thank you.
Committee Room 29. Sound.